Auburn's most important.
Whoa! Whoa!
Great start.
Keep
Great
that
start.
in. Keep it in. Eric Singleton getting you all choked up.
All right. 3, 2, 1, ready. Here we go. Auburn's most important transfer is not exactly just Jackson Arnold. Zac Blackerby, Locked On Auburn, joining me here to discuss. Here's why I think it's Eric Singleton, Zach, who is one of the top wide receivers in the portal that moved. He comes over from Georgia Tech. Keandre Lambert-Smith last year had over 900 yards receiving on 50 catches, and that wasn't an offense that didn't do a whole heck of a lot. Arnold just had a season in which everything around him was a mess, and it went horribly. He got benched, then he returned. It wasn't any good. So the premise of him succeeding at Auburn, to me, is predicated on he needs to have an incredibly strong support system around him, and one guy in Cam Coleman can only do so much as great as he is.
Yeah. Certainly get the argument for sure. And if Jackson Arnold does pop, like you said, Eric Singleton probably has a massive part to do with it. I love that you brought up KLS, Keandre Lambert-Smith, because to me, he was one of the surprises last year. You know, Penn State was kind of like, okay, good. Glad you're leaving. Auburn was super stoked to have a guy like KLS come in. And I had decent expectations, but I think he exceeded all of them. And some of that had to do with all the attention being on, star freshman last year, Cam Coleman. And KLS was a leader in that room. What's interesting is Singleton, the assumed KLS replacement, very different type players. Eric Singleton is much faster, I think much more athletic and much more dynamic and more versatile. He played slot and outside receiver at Georgia Tech, so we'll see how he's used at Auburn. That, KLS was your outside guy. He was a possession guy. So I'm excited to see how Singleton replaces Keandre Lambert-Smith in this Hugh Freeze offense.
If he's able to have the year that he's capable of, that you and I think he's capable of, the 24/7, and their rankings think that he's capable of producing, is this one of the best wide receiver tandems in the SEC? Because
yes,
there's plenty of turnover. You look at Tennessee's receiving core was great last year. They're having a bunch of guys leave. Ryan Williams never had a truly established number 2. I didn't think for Alabama a whole heck of a lot last year. Like, if these two guys are good and it goes how Auburn wants, Zach, I think they could both be over 1,000 yards.
Wow. Yeah. Then, what does that do as far as wins and losses? We'll certainly have to see. I don't know if it's been a long time since Auburn had a 1,000-yard receiver. I don't know if they all of a sudden jump from 0 to 2. A man can dream, and I'm there with you. Something you said a second ago, in an offense that didn't do a whole lot when you talk about what KLS did last year. Auburn's offense was productive. They just didn't score points, Spencer. They were pretty.
Do you see the oxymoron there? Do you see how? I get what you're saying.
But you cited yards, right? And this was an offense that was able to get yards. They just turned it over a lot, especially in the first half of the season. And then in key plays, they didn't answer the call. And so can Eric Singleton help Jackson Arnold do what KLS and Payton Thorne couldn't do consistently? And I think some of that is talent. Sure, there's a lot of questions about the quarterback role in Hugh Freeze's offense, but I think a lot of this is scheme as well, Spencer. I mean, when you look at the tandem of Cam Coleman and Eric Singleton, and let's don't forget about Malcolm Simmons, who is a very talented true freshman receiver a year ago who got in late and he got better as the season went on. I think he has the chance to be a really, really solid number 3, one of the better number 3 receivers in the SEC. And then they went out and got, a Horatio Fields, who I don't think is a scrub by any means from Wake Forest. And then, former 5-star receiver Perry Thompson, which they flipped from Bama. Can he take that step forward too? So they've got a great room. They've got a great wide receiver room. On paper, one of the best wide receiver rooms that Auburn's had in a very long time, if ever.
I thought last year the narrative around KLS was kind of odd because I liked him at Penn State.
I did too. Sure.
And you're right that it didn't feel like Penn State was making a huge push to keep him around. They were kind of like, if you want to go, then go. We're not going to, do anything. And then what was their biggest shortcoming? Oh, that's right, the wide receiver position. They literally, in the biggest games, could not consistently complete passes on the outside. Big Ten championship game, interception down the sideline. Now, of course, it was better for them to lose that game because that's how college football works nowadays. But they're trying to get the ball to a wide receiver, intercepted. And then they're trying to get a ball wide receiver against Notre Dame in the semifinal, intercepted. And I just really liked what KLS brought to that Auburn offense. And
Sure.
I hear you on the differences between him and Singleton. I wonder if it doesn't open things up for Cam Coleman in a respect, because Singleton is a burner. He's a kind of Tyreek Hill style, go over the top and just run straight by you. Does that open up the middle of the field for Cam Coleman for him to have an even bigger year?
It certainly could. It certainly could. And we'll see exactly what kind of roles that does open up for a lot of these guys. I think it's more than just Cam Coleman when you talk about this Auburn receiving core. So it does go back to Jackson Arnold, though, and all of this. There's such a large contingency that's putting Auburn's shortcomings last year on quarterback play. I think that had some to do with it. I think a lot of it was scheme and play calling. And so we got to see how Auburn addresses all of that. But, I mean, you said at the top of the segment here, Jackson Arnold's situation in Oklahoma was terrible. And everybody's writing him off. Horrible. And this is the same guy that last offseason, I mean, we saw it at SEC Media Days. People were hyping up Oklahoma. And I remember asking you and asking several people, like, they're replacing the entire offensive line, and they have questions about the receiving core. I agree that Jackson Arnold's talented. And now we fast forward a year later, and all of a sudden now everybody's writing Jackson Arnold off, despite him being in a significantly better situation, even if you include the offensive line. And I know, and I agree with you that Eric Singleton is a super crucial transfer portal addition. If you take out John Mateer, I mean, he was the best, he's the highest rated player in the portal until John Mateer entered the portal. But another guy that I think impacts Jackson Arnold just as much is Xavier Chaplin, who's the number one offensive tackle in the portal from Virginia Tech. I mean, I think he has a sizable impact on this offense as well. So Jackson Arnold should be in a much different and much better situation than what we saw with him a year ago.
I said Hugh Freeze needs 7 wins to keep himself either off the hot seat or employed by Auburn University this year. Do you agree?
I mean, we all know that there's variables that go into this. I do think there's a world where he could go 6-6 and keep his job, but I think 7-5 is, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I just don't know that you could make. I agree with the variables point. If the injuries flood in, if they're on a third string quarterback by week 5 because guys keep getting hurt, if 3 offensive linemen go down in the first week, you can give some context to it.
Well, let's be even more realistic. Let's say they trip up on their road games and they lose to Georgia and Bama at home, and they lose a game they're not supposed to. That put them at 6-6. But what if they continue the recruiting trend and somehow in a world where they go 6-6, they hold on to their roster and they have another top 6 or 7 recruiting class? And if he's able to hold it all together, I don't think you can move on from him in that situation. And once again, we're talking worst case scenario.
Yeah. It would certainly be tough because I think the back half of Auburn's schedule is incredibly favorable.
Oh, there's a 4-game stretch there
where they should go at least 3-1.
I think so.
And I don't think they go winless the rest of the year. I think they're going to be.
And we kind of did this last year too, where it's like the schedule makes sense. But Missouri, I don't think they have a stretch where after Georgia, it's Missouri at home, at Arkansas, Kentucky at home, at Vandy.
Yeah, that's the stretch.
And then versus Mercer. Like, they should go 4-1 in that stretch.
Yeah. I think if they do, Freeze is likely safe because that means they're competent enough to, win in that 7-win range. The question will just be, is there anything that excites Auburn fans going into 2026, or will it just be, you don't fire him after that season with the way he's recruiting, or is it just going to be, or maybe they beat Alabama and Auburn is electrified into, hey, Hugh Freeze is the greatest coach in the history of college football, or something along those lines.
Yeah, and I think some of it depends too on, can you steal one at Oklahoma or at Texas A&M? Do you beat Baylor on the road? And I think if you go 2-3 in those first 3 road games at Baylor, at OU, and at Texas A&M, like, I do think Auburn's fine. Yeah,
I think they can be, but if they go 5-7, Hugh Freeze, I think, will.
Yeah, and once again, we had this conversation when they started the season last year. It's like, okay, they should be 4-0 when they host Oklahoma.
Yep.
And they lost to Cal and Arkansas.
So it was not.
You got to play the games. Got to play the games.
Did not go according to plan. Zac Blackerby.
Wow.
Locked on Auburn. I'm totally fine today, I assure you. And Wisconsin's technically fine. They extended Luke Fickell. I have no idea what's going on up there.
What is happening?